Welcome back. After months of hand-wringing negotiations and the threat of a rank-and-file rebellion, House Republicans are now barreling towards votes next week on immigration in and some centrist Republicans were trying to force votes to protect the young immigrants known as Dreamers, who are at risk of deportation. But that group, which had the backing of all of the House Democrats, fell just short of gathering enough support to force their bill on the floor via something called a discharge petition. Now, Speaker Paul Ryan moved to quell this rebellion and avoid an embarrassing vote on that legislation that the Republican base would hate. So now the House will vote next week on two immigration bills, one that's favored by their more conservative members of their conference and another compromise measure that's still being written. So what happens now? Is there any intra-Republican compromise that can pass the House and do so without Democratic votes? Joined now by Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo, who's been one of the leading centrists pushing for this immigration vote in his own party. Congressman Curbelo, welcome back to the show.
Chuck, good to be with you.
So, I've heard some of your comments earlier today. We don't know what this bill looks like yet. Why are you confident that you're not going to need to do a discharge petition to sort of force them to do a true protection vote when you don't know what's in this bill yet?
Well, Chuck, two things. Number one, the discharge petition remains alive. And last night, when the Speaker announced that we would be having these votes, I made it a point to put out a statement telling colleagues we must remain committed to the discharge petition. The discharge petition is the driving force behind everything that's happening here on the Hill, and I'm grateful to my Republican and Democratic colleagues that have been a part of this effort. We are making a difference. You know that this issue about a month ago was dead in Congress. No one thought that immigration would have a chance at being debated and considered for the rest of this year. Leaders had done, as they've done for many years now, decided to punt and wait until after the next election. We have changed that. Now we have the possibility of votes on the floor next week and of getting a product over to the Senate that will force them to act. And then we'll see what happens after that. We either go to conference or take something from the Senate and get it to the president's desk. This is what we have all been waiting for years.
All right. What is Speaker Ryan has said a couple things. He wasn't going to put a bill on the floor that didn't have at least well, and I think number one is he wasn't going to put a bill on the floor that the president wouldn't sign. Is that still the sense you get, that whatever compromise bill is put on the floor is something that Speaker Ryan believes the president will sign, or is that not the agreement that you ended up with?
That is my understanding, and I believe that the Speaker's office and the Majority Leader have kept the White House abreast of all of the negotiations, and what I'm hearing is that the White House is inclined to support the legislation. Now, this is important, Todd, because our goal here is to make law. For members like me, the Dreamer issue is so important. We know that towards the end of the year, these young people could be exposed to deportation depending on how the court case goes. And that's why our goal is to make law, not just to get a vote where members can go back to their districts and say, I voted for this or I voted for that. So even though we are an independent branch of government and I'm not the type to want to wait for any White House to give us permission to proceed, in this case, I do think it would be helpful if we knew the White House would sign something. That way we know we're not wasting our time and we're working on a product that can result in the protections that Dreamers need and securing a future for them and getting them into the legal immigration system. And then, of course, addressing a number of other priorities like border security and reforming the visa system, which is important to the White House and I think to a lot of Americans as well.
I want to go back. Why didn't you, to keep the pressure on, actually get your 218 and then be willing to table it, but have it written down? Have it there so you tell Speaker Ryan, buddy, this compromise bill better be what we're saying, or we're filing it immediately. By being short of the number, aren't you losing some leverage?
Well, no, because, Chuck, we'll still have the opportunity in July to discharge the rule that includes these four bills that we had proposed debating on the floor. We have 216 signatures. Those signatures are still on the petition. And at any point, today, tomorrow, two members can go down and sign it if we feel that in any way there's been a breach of trust or that someone isn't keeping their word. So the discharge petition remains alive. At the same time, we're at the table negotiating, and hopefully we can come up with a product. We're really close. And look, this isn't the bill that I would have sat alone and written, but it is the product of a compromise between centrist Republicans and our colleagues on the right. And hopefully we can get this done and have a win on immigration in our country for the first time since George W. Bush introduced this idea in 2005.
Do you imagine that the compromise bill that you would be more inclined to support over Goodlatte, I assume that that's going to be the conservative alternative, but we'll see what... Do I assume that you would have to get Democratic votes in order to see it passed? And if so, then what do you do about Nancy Pelosi, who said today in a tweet, protecting Dreamers stands on its own merits. If Republicans plan to use Dreamers as a way to advance Donald Trump's xenophobic anti-immigrant agenda, they will get a fight from House Democrats. Did you take that as a threat that House Democrats may pull back on their support for your efforts? Because they've been very supportive of your efforts, Congressman.
I think it's pretty clear that they wouldn't be willing to support this compromise legislation, and it's regrettable because it's the all-or-none approach. Gotten us nothing on immigration for 13 years. I would ask them to consider it, to review it when it's published. But hey, worst case scenario for them, we get a Republican-only bill out of the House. It goes to the Senate, goes through the bipartisan process there, and then comes back. And maybe some of them can support it then. Ideally, we could do this in a bipartisan nature. It's a very controversial issue. It's politically charged, so that makes it harder.
Yep. All right, Congressman Carlos Curbelo. From my neck of the woods, where I grew up down in South Florida.
That's
Thanks for coming on, Republican from South Florida.
Go
Thanks.